조지 오웰 애니멀 팜 챕터 5. As winter grew on, Molly became more and more troublesome. She was late for work every morning and excused herself by saying that she had overslept, and she complained of mysterious pain, although her appetite was excellent. On every kind of pretext, she would run away from work and go to the drinking pool, where she would stand foolishly gazing at her own reflection in the water. But there were also rumors of something more serious. One day, as Molly strolled blithely into the yard, Plitter, in her long tail and chewing at a stalk of hay, Clover took her aside. "Molly," she said, "I have something very serious to say to you. This morning I saw you looking over the hedge of a divided animal farm from Foxwood. One of Mr. Picklington's men was standing on the other side of the hedge, and I was a long way away, but I am almost certain I saw this. He was talking to you, and you were allowing him to stroke your nose." "What does that mean, Molly?" "He didn't. I wasn't. It isn't true," cried Molly, beginning to prance about and paw the ground. "Molly, look me in the face. Do you give me your word of honor that that man was not stroking your nose?" "It isn't true," repeated Molly, but she could not look Clover in the face, and the next moment she took to her heel and galloped away into the field. Her son struck Clover without saying anything to the others. She went to Molly's store and turned over the straw with her hoof. Hidden under the straw were a little pile of lump sugar and several bunches of ribbon of different colors. 3 days later, Molly disappeared. For some weeks, nothing was known her whereabouts. Then the pigeons reported that they had seen her on the other side of Wellington. She was between the shop of the smart dog cart, painted red and black, which was standing outside a public house. A pale, red-faced man in check breeches and gaiters, he looked like a publican, was stroking her nose and feeding her with sugar. Her coat was newly clipped, and she wore a scarlet ribbon round her forelock. She appeared to be enjoying herself, so the pigeon said. None of the animals ever mentioned Molly again. In January there came bitterly hard winter. The earth was like iron, and nothing could be done in the field. Many meetings were held in the big barn, and the pigs occupied themselves with planning out the work of coming season. It had come to accept that the pigs, who were manifestly cleverer than the other animals, should decide all questions of farm policy, though their decision had to be ratified by a majority vote. This arrangement would have worked well enough if it had not been for the dispute between Snowball and Napoleon. These two disagreed at every point where disagreement was possible. If one of them suggested showing a bigger acreage with barley, another certain demanded a bigger acreage of oat, and if one of them said that such and such a field was just right for cabbage, the other would declare that it was useless for anything except the roots. Each had his own problem, and there was some violent debate. At the meeting, Snowball often won over the majority by his brilliant speeches, but Napoleon are better and canvassing support for himself in between times. He was especially succeed with the ship. Of late, the ship had taken to bleating, 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, both in and out of season, and they often interrupted the meeting with this. It was noticed that they were especially liable to break into 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, and crucial moment in Snowball's speeches. Snowball had made a close study of some back numbers of the farmer and stock breeder, which he had found in the farmhouse, and was full of plan for innovation and improvement. He talked learnedly about field drain, silage, and basic slag, and had worked out a complicated scheme for all the animals to drop their dung directly in the field at a different spot every day to save the labor of cartage. Napoleon produced no scheme of his own, but said quietly that snowballs would come to nothing, and seemed to be biding his time. But all of the controversy, none was so bitter as the one of the took place over the windmill. In the long pasture, not far from the farm building, there are small knoll, which was the highest point of the farm. After surveying the ground, Snowball declared that this was just the place for a windmill, which could be made of operate dynamo and supply the farm with electrical power. This would light the stalls and warm them in winter, and would also run a circular saw and chose cutter and manzel slicer and electric milking machine. The animal had never heard of anything of this kind before, for the farm was an old-fashioned one and had only the most primitive machinery. And they listened in astonishment while Snowball conjured up the pictures of fanatic machines which would do their work for them while they grazed at their ease in the field and improved their minds with reading and conversation. Video for weeks, Snowball's plans for a windmill were fully worked out. The mechanical detail came mostly from 3 books which had belonged to Mr. Jones. 1,000 useful things to do about the house. Every man hit one flag leaf, and electric for beginners. Snowball used as his study a shed which had once had used for incubator and had a smooth wooden floor suitable for drawing on. He was closeted there for hours at a time, with his books held often by a stone and with a piece of chalk left between the knuckle of his throttle. He would move rapidly to and fro, drawing in line after line and altering little whimpers of excitement. Gradually, the flange grew into a complicated mess of cranks and cog wheels, covering more than half an half floor, which the other animal found completely unintelligible but very impressive. All of them came to look at Snowball drawing at least once a day. Even the hens and dogs came, and were faint not to tread on the chalk marks. Only Napoleon held aloof. He had declared himself against the windmill from the start. One day, however, he arrived unexpectedly to examine the plan. He walked heavily round the shed, looked closely at every detail of the plan, and snuffed at them once or twice, then stood for a little while contemplating them out of the corner of his eye. Then suddenly he lifted his leg, urinated over the plan, and walked out without uttering a word. The whole farm deeply divides the subject of the windmill. Snowball did not deny that to build it would be a difficult business. Stone would have to be carried and built up into walls. Then the sails would have to be made, and after the three, there would be need for dynamos and cable. How did you want to be procured? Snowball did not say, but she maintained that it could be all be done in a year, and thereafter he declared so much labor would be saved that the animal would only need to work 3 days a week. Napoleon, on the other hand, argued that great deed of the monument and movement was to increase production, and that if they wasted time on the windmill, they would all starve to death. The animals formed themselves into two factions under the slogans, both for Snowball and the 3-day week, and both for Napoleon and the full manga. Benjamin was the only animal who did not side with either faction. He refused to believe either that food would become more plentiful or that the windmill would save work. Windmill or no windmill, he said, life would go on as it had always gone on. That is, badly. Apart from the dispute over the windmill, there was the question of the defense of the farm. It was fully realized that though the human being had been defeated in the battle of the cowshed, they might have another and more determined attempt to recapture the farm and reinstate Mr. Jones. They had all the more reason for doing so because the news of their defeat and spread across the countryside and made the animal on the naval farm more restive than ever. As usual, Snowball and Napoleon were in disagreement. According to Napoleon, what the animal must do was to procure firearms and procure arms and train themselves in the use of them. According to Snowball, they must stand on more and more fission and stir up rebellion among the animals on the other farms. The one argued that if rebellion happened everywhere, they would have no need to defend themselves. The animal listened first to Napoleon, then to Snowball, and could not make up their mind which was right. Indeed, they always found themselves in agreement with the one who was speaking at the moment.